Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Grit Makers podcast. As usual, when we start the episode, we have our little countdown that make us giggle, but now we are fully present with you and super excited to be. This is the place to be inspired and inspire each other and for you as well. So thank you guys for joining us live. Please feel free to drop in the comment where you're dialing from, ask us any questions that come up, and share your own definition of resilience as well. And during this time, I am super excited to welcome three new guests this month to discuss about resilience, feminine resilience, what it means to claim it in our own way. But without further ado, I will love to hear a little bit more about you, Molly. Thank you for joining us and tell us a little bit more about you and your own definition of resilience.
Thank you for having me. My name is Molly. I am an author of two memoirs that are out in the world, and I also am trained in something called somatic experiencing. So it is a trauma resolution modality and resilience building modality that works with the nervous system. So I run workshops and retreats all over the United States, bringing the story making part of the human mammal in with the soma, so that we're working with top down, bottom up to develop healing and also essence, like coming into our essence, primarily for visionaries and people who would consider themselves leaders. And I also have an arm of my work that focuses on attention in this era and how to harness our attention and not be fractured. So for me, resilience in one line is having fluidity in our physiology and in our story, and knowing how to community build and be in our body in a present moment. Yeah. I'm so glad to be here with you all.
Really loving sitting here for a couple of seconds, to be present, to take this time to fully embrace that chance and this time that everyone in the audience, that you ladies have taken to be present with us in this moment. And as we savor that, I'm turning to Kylie, another
Hi.
author.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So, my name is Kylie. I am the author of also a memoir. So, I was raised by a narcissistic mother, and I've been no contact now for nearly 11 years. And I decided to put my story out to the world. And in doing so, I've built a community of almost 100,000 women from all over the world now, and we're all connecting together. And I've kind of somehow become a healing advocate, and it's just such an honor to be able to guide these women who are also kind of survivors of narcissistic mothers through that healing journey. I have online courses and workshops and lots of other things in the pipeline. So yeah, that's me. Resilience to me would be kind of having that phoenix rising moment and being reborn from the ashes. For anyone out there that has been raised by a narcissistic mother, your whole life is you've kind of been set up to fail and have been told that you can't be anything. So turning that around and proving them wrong is my resilience moment.
Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing. Thank you for showing up as well and for sharing what you're doing and your own views. Because if there's one thing that I've learned talking about resilience, about 50 people interviewed in, there's 50 different definitions. And it's
Yeah.
surprising because quite often we have a terminology in our head and we don't go to the extent or the effort to exchange about it. We just assume that everyone has the same views or has the same chat GBT definition. And we don't make the space or the time to clarify that. But I'm very excited that we're taking this opportunity And for you guys as well, dialing in, please drop in what's your own definition of resilience? What's your own story if you want to share as well? Before I turn to Hedy now to introduce herself, and please do tell us your own views.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, Mona. I'm a body worker and a mindfulness teacher, and I teach change makers to uncondition their bodies, their voices, their nervous system from systems built to keep us small so we can stand, speak, and move through life with sovereign power. I think my life has been a constant unconditioning of all the narratives, all the things that I learned, all the things that at some point I thought it was beneficial, and then it was beneficial to an extent, and then I had to let go of what previously I thought was working, and constantly being able to stay open to new evolution of myself and being open to soften the grip. And I feel like in my definition of resilience is having an ability to hold polarities, and polarities within ourselves and polarities within the world. And I feel like it's so needed these days, and perhaps more than ever. And it's not always easy, but there's something that I constantly feel like I'm meeting the edge of where my middle is, right? Like I can go to the extreme and then being able to bring myself back to somewhere that is more of a middle for me.
That is quite important. The duality that we face in life is always this temptation to turn to, or it's either good or bad. It's either black or white. And we forget that most of life sometimes happen maybe in the gray area. And it's quite important to see that how it's embedded, in your definition as well. Because I think it's coming down to the topic of the day, and especially why we've chosen to talk about femininity or feminine resilience. It really came up after a workshop with entrepreneurs and talking about human resilience, and especially the mindset aspect of it, and how we can view resilience in different ways. And this, you know, multiple definition component and multiple facets of resilience component. And someone really jumped out to share how grateful they were that they finally can give themselves permission to see the feminine side of resilience, and that it didn't need to be this strong thing. We always see resilience, oh, it's David Goggins. As much as I love the guy, I adore his books and his stories, but it doesn't always have to be going hard. Um, and it's been very interesting. What's been I mean, this is how I sourced you. This is how I found Molly, because Molly talks about feminine resilience. What drew you to talking a little more about that and sharing your idea around feminine resilience?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I, as a child and maybe as a young person, felt like, put me in the hard spot. I can do it, you know? I had that orientation or maybe that conditioning. And as I grew older, and especially as I learned about the nervous system, um, I learned this physiologic truth, which is that you cannot metabolize the hard thing unless you have a really solid foot in what is pleasurable. Like just on a scientific level, just the physiology of the body. You can't go into the trauma pit and just sit there and push through it and actually heal. That was a big moment for me. Like, and so it encouraged, and I'd always thought pleasure was sort of a distraction, or it was people were avoiding the hard thing, you know? And now, and to me, that movement between what is difficult, and it's like what Hedy was talking about with polarities, what is difficult, and then what feels good, the movement between is the healing space. That's how our body actually heals. And that is feminine, not female, but feminine. Like that movement is feminine and snake-like. And so that, and it's settling too. It feels like, okay, it doesn't have a hard drive behind it. And that aligns in a lot of ways with the natural world for me. So for me, it was a personal shift that happened. Of course, all these awakenings come that way. But, and still, I am still undoing a lot of the ways that I'm driven more to choose the hard path, because it's noble or something, you know? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Finding the glory and sacrifice, isn't it?
Yes. All that. Mm-hmm. All that.
And that's like, is this something that echoes with you, Kylie? Do you feel that sometimes,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
have,
I think something that I learned along my healing journey is exactly like Molly was saying, like we can't always show up and be hard. And I had to really kind of find my softer self and my more vulnerable self. And I almost learned during that journey that actually being vulnerable takes so much strength, and people always see it as a weakness. And now I'm like, embrace those emotions. If you need to cry, then cry. If you want to be angry, all the emotions that we're told are bad emotions, we need to feel them. Um, so I feel like I started to step into my feminine resilience when I started to kind of become really, really vulnerable with myself, and didn't block out those emotions. And it made me stronger in a weird way, because you'd think, oh, sitting there crying every day is not going to make me stronger. It does.
yeah. And I think perhaps it's because we build defense mechanisms that we harden ourselves and we become something that we don't necessarily want to become or want to be, or
Yeah.
we weren't meant to be because we needed to protect ourselves at some
Yeah.
point from many different things that can have occurred to us. And then at some point, as we learn, and Hedgie, you were saying, we learn constantly, the journey never ends and we're shedding things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Did you live that shift, of stepping in your feminine as well in your own ways and what it meant to you?
I work a lot with posture, and this actually has been the breakthrough this year for me, because I'm really exploring this idea of how would it look like and feel like if I showed up and served as I am, without feeling great, without like having my shit together in a way. And so before, if I had an event coming up and I didn't feel good, I would do a lot of breath work, a lot of activation work to get into like preparing myself physiologically to be worthy of serving, because there was this narrative built within me. Like I'm a child, like the first child of a very young parent, like really young. If you look at my parents now, you can't believe they're actually my parents. They were so young when they had me. And then I learned early on, because they didn't know how to regulate themselves and they were like these little kiddos, like they didn't even know, how to handle themselves. And then all of a sudden they have this kid and they have to figure out life, right? And so I learned very early on that I need to put it down and deal with it, like suppress my emotions, because if I get emotional, they can't handle it. Like it's just impossible for them to handle it. And also, like, I had this narrative of I need to be perfect. Like, I need to have all the answers, do all the courses, like, do everything. So then I'll be ready to serve. So then if someone criticizes me, then, my perfect little girl would be really, really hurt. And I realize in my posture, and especially the more I get into the posture work in my work and I teach it more, I also reflect back in myself that, like, whenever in the past I wanted to teach or like be even here, like I would get into this hyperextended mode, like chest out, like really puffing myself and being really like energetic, even though like maybe I had a terrible day and I felt really, really like I felt a lot of stuff coming up. And now I'm really practicing of like finding that position of neutrality, like the in the middle place, like and not discrediting any realities that could possibly be in this moment. And then learning that really opened my eyes to my own patterns, like through my posture of like, oh my God, now you're performing again. Like, can you just let you and be like my I amness be enough, right? Like my humanness be enough for the world. And I think that has a lot of softening to it. And I always associate femininity to softening.
Yeah, this notion of softness and compassion as well. I think perhaps that also goes in hand with saying that perhaps resilience encompass having certain compassion for ourselves to allow ourselves to redefine it in our own terms. Um, what would be some of the frictions that you have noticed? Perhaps someone who has not embraced this yet, or maybe didn't realize, how they were conditioned towards the hardness. What are the frictions that you've noticed before you did the switch? Like, what was it for you? This perhaps an aha moment that you could share, or something that could help people navigate that?
I think for me, recognizing the system at play, the foundational system that we're operating out of, and having that recognition, and then suddenly I started seeing patterns. And then when you start seeing patterns, that this is how all of us are being conditioned, not only women, probably women more than men, but also men like have a difficult time softening, especially when we go through hardship in life. And when we are not able to soften, we become so fragile. Like I always imagine this really hard thing, hard, dry stick. And if you hit it, it's going to break. But if we add some liquid to it, or it's like some water to it, and it's like softer, then it becomes more, like this. And I always use this example like for posture work. And I feel like recognizing there's a greater system at play. And for me, like thinking that if I want to create change, I need to be willing to explore things that my thinking mind was so conditioned to do the opposite. And then really tapping into, I think like for me, body work really brought that force for me in a very powerful way. I'm not sure if I answered your question or the way you wanted me to answer.
But it's really, I'd say yes, it's more an exploration than a question, to be honest. It's really trying to navigate things, because we have had to face certain things before we opened our horizon to going and exploring other things. But perhaps someone is not to compare journeys, but just in a corner where they haven't turned yet, they haven't seen that yet. And perhaps there are some like points that we can tell them, well, you'll see it after that point, right? So I'm really trying to give a different texture of your journeys so people can help navigate what they can't see yet, but trusting that it will happen in their own time and in their own terms as well. What was that? What were those textures like for you, Kylie?
I think what comes to mind for me is when I decided to cut my mum off, I just thought that was just, we had a difficult relationship. And when I started to kind of understand the abuse and, I found the word for it, and it was almost like someone had given me a blueprint to my life. And I had my eureka moment, like, oh, this is my life. Like, I can relate to this. I almost found comfort in hearing that someone else went through a similar thing for me. Um, and I feel like when you are in a relationship like that with your mother, you have a lot of shame and you feel really embarrassed. So we don't speak about it because we think it's just us. So that's why building my community was so important to me, because you almost want to give people that comfort to let them know it's not just you. There are patterns that you can recognize, you can identify the abuse, and when you find that comfort, that's when you start to soften and you start to have an understanding of everything you went through, and then you start to kind of grieve that relationship, and you start to find forgiveness for yourself, because we blame ourselves a lot growing up in environments like that. Like, what did we do? How could we have made it better? So I think that would have been my turning point for me, is to kind of identify what it was and realize it wasn't just me.
Having the power of community to almost
Yeah.
create that safe space for you to allow yourself to finally soften.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And did you notice a similar shift, Molly, or maybe was it something completely different for you?
You know, for the softening for me is about pacing. And a number of years ago, I had an emergency blood transfusion because I had not been really paying attention to the fact that I had an idea, I had a story that the 27-day menstrual period that I was having was me shedding something. That was my story, right? That I was getting rid of something that I needed to get rid of. And I wasn't really tracking, like, this isn't okay and I need rest. And I had 2 little kids at the time. And so I ended up in the emergency room. And that was really that wasn't the first initiation, but that was an initiation into actually rest is not an idea. It is a thing that really is a birthright. It's not an extra. It's not like you get this once you've completed X. And I still struggle with that. I'm still in that negotiation. I'm really further on the spiral path with that. But that is systemic, right? I think we all have some version of that. And I had so much judgment around rest. Like, I would see people lounging or just taking time to just be, and I would think, who does she think she is, just lounging? And then I would ask myself, like, why am I thinking that about this person? There's something in me that finds a lot of judgment about that. And so it's become a practice of I would, lounge myself, and my children would say, "What are you doing?" Because they weren't used to seeing me literally lounge, And so now it's this real deep undoing in me of to come to a place of it is okay to really letting my body know. I understand it here, but letting my body know it is okay to nothing. And as an entrepreneur, that is complicated. So for me, that's the softening. And it always has come through a message from the body for me. And so I'm continually listening and trying to track that and meet those edges for myself, Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think like it's a hazard that we just hazard is that like I'm pretty sure this like in French that I mean it, but anyway, there's really a reason why there's so many somatic experts in the room, and I think it's really linked to that. We kind of are trained to ignore certain of our needs. We're conditioned in a certain way until the body catches up with us. And that's why we see so many burnouts, is that our defense mechanism are built to protect us, to protect the child within us. And it leads us to a certain place, to high achievement, big careers, whatever we're building. And at some point, it's not sustainable anymore because those needs still exist. And the body then is like, okay, well, now fuck off. I've given you enough grace. I've given you the strength. I've stayed hard long enough. And please now let me crumble. Give me some love. And that's why we see burnout or chronic illness or just like constantly having a cold. I remember years and years and years being cold every month for 3 weeks. I would have the cough, I have the runny nose, and it was constant. And no, it wasn't an allergy, and no, it wasn't like to do with certain environments. And the more you listen to your body, and the more you get closer to aligning with yourself and doing things that you're more meant to do, there's a shift that occurs.
Mm.
What was the hardest thing for you to change, to step up into something that was kinder to yourself?
Me? Okay. Um, mm, the hardest thing as I sit here and really ask in this moment was creating a boundary with other people and having the capacity in myself to be able to weather their response. In particular, my children, who, I would have to say, no, I cannot do this thing right now for you because I need food or I need to take a nap. And there's a period of time in which whoever you're setting a boundary with, they have to adjust. And that period is a challenging one. Was a challenging one for me because I needed to have the capacity to hold their dysregulation around, wait a minute, what's happening? And sometimes I could hold it and sometimes I couldn't still. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. So that continues to be my edge around taking care of whatever need I have. How do I do this and let the people around me who need me know that they can't need me right now or they can need me right now, but I actually cannot provide right now, so that I think that will be constant for me, especially with children. And I think that happens outside of parenting too. It happens with colleagues, it happens with partners, with friends, all that. So, and the last thing I'll say there, the most beautiful insights I've had are particularly with friends where I have said to a friend, I love you, and I cannot do that right now because I'm doing this. And then for them to say that to me, and then it creates a culture in your friendship around, like, we can be this way together. We're not going to fawn, we're not going to just meet everyone's needs and pretend we're okay. And then it just creates like a robustness in your relationship because you trust that the other person is actually meaning what they say. So that's interesting to me. Like, I want those kinds of relationships. I thrive in those kinds of relationships. It's not always easy to create that.
Yeah. Set boundaries and yet use that to reinforce the communication in the relationships.
Mm.
and it's a good opportunity to say hi and strengthen the relationships with everyone who's joined us today. Hi Penny, hi Christy, hi Teresa. Thanks for joining us. Please don't hesitate, everyone else. Don't be shy. Drop us your views, your questions. We'll be happy to address them live. And also any story that you want to share about your own experience with change, transformation, and defining things in your own terms. But when we talk about boundaries, obviously that is a very key component in your life, Kylie.
Yeah.
But how did that also transfer maybe into your other relationships? Because you've had to really learn from that parent and child relationship. And
Yeah. I think boundaries, it was always something that was really hard for me because I I was raised to be a people pleaser. I was a parent pleaser. So naturally in all my relationships, I just didn't want to do anything that was going to make me seem like a bad person. So boundaries were something that I had to work on for a really long time, and I'm still working on them now. Um, I think the biggest challenge for me is actually sticking to the boundary. So I can set them really well, but then when they get tested, I sometimes spiral out a little bit. And I had an example of this kind of last year where I'd set a boundary and I was getting tested on it by all avenues, and I had to just kind of take a step back and say, why is this triggering me so much? And it was triggering me because I'm not used to sticking to my boundaries. So I kind of had to remind myself, like, it's okay to not do what other people do, and to put, like, to basically put my needs first. I forgot what the question was.
It was exactly that. It's
Okay, cool.
really what's the hardest, to do in
Yeah,
the situation when you have
yeah,
to look out for yourself,
yeah.
and that's the hard things. And boundaries often come up as one of the hardest thing to establish, especially because, well, certain people don't care, but sometimes it's hard to say no to someone, or we don't want to disappoint someone. I often say
Yeah.
to people, nobody has woken up that day to make your life a nightmare.
Mhm.
Uh, like there is always other reasons behind it. But I find like the hardest thing as well to do with boundaries is the ones we set with ourselves.
Mhm.
When we tell or talk to ourselves
Yeah.
about something, or decide to set our mind onto something, and then we don't stick with it. And they are the dangerous ones, because once you
Mm.
set boundaries within yourself, it's easier to set them with others.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's hard to do, and especially growing up with a narcissist parent,
Mhm.
or even facing that in relationships in general, it chips at you, and it chips
Yeah,
at confidence as well that you might have. Um,
absolutely.
Hedy, for you, do you recognize yourself in the challenge of boundaries, or did you face another challenge that was a little harder even for you to stick to?
When I was thinking about it, you said it, like literally, like creating that boundary within myself in a way. And I always feel like I had this two really clear parts within myself, and one of them was the punishing person, right? Like I could see this part of me constantly wanting to punish me for everything. Like I had, if by definition, if in my head, or if in their perspective, in her perspective, if I wasn't perfect, then I needed to be punished. And that actually took such a long time for me doing IFS work, inner family system, internal family system, and really sitting with the conversations that was actually going on, and how much this part created a lot of tension in the system. And obviously this part was created for good reasons. Like all the parts that we develop, they have a good intention, but then it gets to a point that it becomes self-destructive. And I think I had a lot of those patterns, and especially when you run your own business and you want to put yourself forward, like obviously having this constantly like torturing you when you're working really hard to put yourself out there, right? And I wouldn't say like I created boundaries necessarily with that part, but I got a deeper understanding of that part, and being able to unburden that part from the responsibility it played for a very long time. And I also feel like sometimes, I think after that, my relationship with boundaries as well changed. I love having boundaries, but I also recognize so many people create boundaries as a way of avoiding the difficult emotions that it brings for them, or we confuse safety with discomfort of like, okay, this dynamic is making me uncomfortable, and I need to have a communication established, or like really voicing what I need right now. And I even feel like now I got into a point that I can feel this scratching in my throat if I feel like it's time, and I'm not, like, my whole body want to say something, but I say, oh no, I shouldn't be doing that, right? And I feel like now I'm really sitting with this idea of, okay, how can I set boundaries without being rigid, right? And constantly finding like the polarities, and also being able, and in that experimentation, I've gotten more like I'm understanding myself better. I'm softer towards myself. I'm more compassionate towards myself. And it's not a hard line necessarily. I can always revisit that, and that really freed me, because then if in the past I had a boundary and then for whatever reason I felt like I needed that dynamic going on, but then I would break it myself, and then I would blame myself and shame myself that I didn't stick to my boundary, right? Obviously, like, probably that boundary that I set wasn't the boundary I needed with that particular relationship. I think being able to use boundaries as a way of improving our lives rather than finding a way to shame ourselves more into a downward spiral, that I certainly did, and I went through that phase for a very long time.
Yeah, the punishment is an element that comes back in a sense of almost trying to, or being conditioned to punish ourselves to a certain aspect. And that negative voice in our head, which isn't ours to begin with, coming from a conditioning or someone else, and then we completely embrace it as part of us, and we become our own punisher. Like, it's not society anymore that punishes you. It's not the person that made you suffer or hurt you or traumatized you anymore. It's just transfer that role onto you and onto us to carry on the job. And I think that's perhaps as well a way that we've learned to defend ourselves, was the defensor role that came in that hardness, in maybe what we've been taught was maybe something a little more masculine or something a little more hard or tough, was coming as the defender, and then we embrace it and we start becoming that defender for ourselves so we can survive. Perhaps that's something that had happened for us to evolve. And now that we're in this room, at least, maybe a little more aware of things that are happening around us, within us, and the impact that it has, how do we empower ourselves with softness towards a dream situation or towards the ideal situation we want to head to? Setting aside boundaries. How do we show up for ourselves every day?
I think for me, it goes back to what Molly was saying before about listening to our bodies. So I think in order for me to show up as my authentic self, if I'm tired, I need to listen to my body and rest. And that's something, again, like Molly was saying, I used to really struggle with. But I've learned that I'm a lot more productive if I just need a duvet day, I'm going to have a duvet day and not make myself feel bad, because then I know the rest of my week is going to be more productive and I'm going to get more done because I'm not tired and I'm not overworked. And that really helps me kind of let go of that guilt of that I used to have of resting. Because, you know, what I'm finding as well is a lot of my community, especially when you've had trauma, you've suppressed so many emotions for years and years and years, and you need to reset your nervous system and allow it that time to rest. And I think society, it kind of tells us that that's lazy. And so yeah, I guess for me, just listening to my body has helped me overcome that.
And do you find as well that there's, I mean, it's a skewed question, but women's health is also a big play. Health in general, also, we don't want to exclude men or all possible gender. Every time we have like this topic, it's like, don't want to exclude anyone. But at the end, our bodies have certain specificities and hormonal balances or imbalances, or
Yeah.
certain chemicals who are more developed for some than others. And it's always going back and circling back to that. So when your body is giving you certain signals and claiming some needs,
Yeah.
how do you show up for it?
absolutely. I never used to, but now I'm like, you know what, cancel everything. I need to eat ice cream in bed. And yeah, but learning, kind of rewiring your brain to accept that that's okay is hard
Mm-hmm.
because people do judge you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How do you ladies navigate that?
Well, I could say that, going off of what Kylie shared, it has helped me so much to notice the teeny micro changes. So to use Kylie's example of the ice cream in bed, like if that feels nourishing for her, then to notice it's happening and then to tell someone I'm doing this, I'm in bed, I'm taking care of myself, I'm eating ice cream, it feels nice. And then it builds, and that actually creates a new neural pathway. So for me, like, with your question about how to, like, vision, or not even vision, but actually live into whatever it is I'm wanting to live into, yes, I do believe there are leaps that happen, but ultimately the teeny tiny, and it's so frustrating and sometimes not sexy, right? Because it's like the little teeny tiny changes as opposed to like the big leap off the cliff. But it's these little things that, where you become someone who, like, I have become a person who takes a day in bed. That is now part of my story, and now it's something I share with people, and then it's part of my nervous system new patterning. And like what was adaptive initially, which was like working all the time, is not adaptive anymore. And so now I'm creating a new adaptation. And then it becomes something that your body just starts to do. So that, I've found so much traction with that in my life and with the people I work with. Just those tiny little changes and noticing them and then sharing about it, so that your community can hold like the frequency and the resonance of you becoming. So they're not holding you as like Molly, the person who never rests. Like updating my friend group, guess what? Like, I rested today. This is what I do now. And I think on an energetic level, that actually, it shifts a way that people are holding who you are, which matters because we're reflecting each other all the time. So for me, I would say that's like my go-to way of creating whatever it is I want to create. Yeah.
Getting other involved as well keep you accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you voice it, you have to rest.
Yeah. It also removes the shame as well that we have around rest. It's like, oh yeah, hey, I'm resting, guys, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be embarrassed about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're normalizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I have a question that I always ask. I actually have it as a sticky note on my desk. And the question is, what do you need to enjoy yourself more? Even when you're tired, right? Even when you're working. And I find like this question always gives me perspective, because when I'm feeling tired, I'm like, oh my God, I actually want to get in bed and watch my favorite interior design video, and then maybe have a cacao drink in my hand. And that automatically like guides my next step. And even like, for example, I always design my life in a way around my cycle, and I've been really like been clear around that. But then at the same time, with anything, like I don't want too many rules and too many constructs, and telling myself, oh, just because is the week of my period, then I can't do any lives. Like I need to be hiding in my little corner. And I certainly have done that, but I realized it was actually disempowering. But for example, this week is one of those weeks, and bath stop is one of those things that's taking all my tension away. And I made that, like I was like, okay, I'm gonna go just sit in the bath and enjoy myself, like in the morning that you normally get up to work. I was like, okay, I have a full day, but this would give me that enjoyment, right? Or how, like, I need to show up, but I'm feeling a little bit insecure. How can I get myself dressed and enjoy myself and dressing myself, so then I can feel a little bit more grounded in my own body. And as I adorn myself, like I actually witness myself in it. And I feel like this question, no matter how I feel, always gives me a really like an answer that I need. And yeah, and hence I have it right in front of me.
It is quite a useful tip. And it's also important what you say. It's also that week for me. And I noticed the changes that needs to happen or that happen naturally is in my workout. I try to work out every day. It's really something that has taken years and years and years to implement, like a habit that really changed my life. And that is like something that matters to me as part of taking care of myself. So when you want to train every day, you, and you face that some weeks you can't train the same way as the previous one, it can get a little frustrating. And sometimes, and it used to be frustrating until I've learned to navigate that and figure out what were the things that I was actually very good at during those weeks and the other things that I was not so good at, and change my training accordingly. And we are not taught to do that. I don't remember, like, when we had PT at school, there was nothing that was done differently for females. Perhaps they would give you the day off, but they would not teach you how to continue training, how to continue doing that thing that you love, that makes you feel better. They would not teach you how to do it in different circumstances. So we learn over time, after decades, how to navigate it. And now the question that I want to ask you, ladies, and open to you as well in the audience. Of course, you please feel free to share your wisdoms, but it's really what are the things around maybe health or mental health that we don't talk enough about? Because there's a lot of things that we mention out there. But there are some important things that maybe have helped you take a leap into a different direction in your life that is not so much spoken about. And what would that be for you?
Bringing the body back to the conversation. And I think so often, like the mental health or like even health, I feel like there's this version of the health is like, oh, we become the slave to our routine. We do the reps and the sets, and we eat like certain amount of protein per day, and we don't care about what kind of protein that is or where it's coming from, or all these things that almost like I feel like it goes back to that systematic problem that we have, that all of us need to become these robots and function as robots and completely disconnected from our bodies. And with what you were saying, like obviously I'm going to put my personal training and strength training hat on, of like, people, like there's a difference between movement and training. Movement is a way of life, but training is like, yes, you can specifically follow a like construct a training, like to gain muscle, to lose weight, or whatever that is. But I think sometimes just because we cannot stick to that regiment, we completely let go of the movement itself. While like, yeah, sometimes I just want to play. Like I get a bunch of weight, I have no agenda for it. I play on the mat. I play like today, literally, I was like, okay, I'm gonna give myself 5 minutes and move some kettlebell around and have had fun with it. I think it's not like cookie cutter like we want it. And until we listen to our bodies and really like be sovereign enough to feel like what our body is communicating is enough without like other people are telling us what we need to be doing, I think we're going to make a lot more progress. I'm sure Molly can speak on that like a lot more with somatic experiencing, how much like suddenly this whole burden is lifted off of you, while like mentally you've done all the talk therapy and everything, and you've been stuck in that loop. And I certainly experienced that myself. Yeah.
Was there? Yeah, go ahead. What was it for you that?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Hetty was saying there, because that is such a feminine impulse right? To ask yourself today in this moment, how do I want to move? Not how do I stick to my structure? Obviously, structure has its place. We need the masculine too. But I've written 2 books, and one of them I wrote in a real masculine way. Like every day I sat down in my seat for 3 hours and I wrote, And then the second one, I had a child at that point, and I didn't have that. I couldn't create that kind of structure. And so it was way more this. and it was a different creative process. And now that's what I use. So I love what Hetty was saying there about all of that. And I would add on the one thing that feels like just now people are talking about, it's just coming into the zeitgeist, and it's all over the place, but I don't know how, I think I hope it lasts, is we have so much amazing information, and we are overloaded with information. And that is a health issue. And like we're so overloaded with health information. Do you know what I mean? It's such a bind because we have all this incredible access, and it is collapsing people because our bodies are not evolved to be able to absorb that kind of information without collapsing. And so we're a little bit on this, we're on this hamster wheel of absorbing a lot of information and then wondering why we feel scattered, tired, overwhelmed, and depressed. And yet then the impulse is to like, well, maybe if I just do another breathing exercise that I find on this something somewhere, instead of maybe I don't need to go look for something. Maybe actually I need to just sit here and water my plant, and that I think is going to be a hard thing for people to confront, that self-confrontation, because we've gotten hooked in to the information. We're in the information era. And so I feel very passionately about that, but it's not, people don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear it because it's hard to unhook from that. So, yeah.
I'm going to add something to that because I feel like with the self-help world, like there are a lot of rules and regulations, right? Like sometimes when I start with a client and they're like, oh, I know I should be doing that. I should be doing that. I should be doing that. I'm like, okay. And she's like, I should be reading this book. I'm like, well, how would it feel like if I asked you for 3 months, 6 months, you don't read any book? Like you don't watch any YouTube videos on a specific subject matter and just really like tuning in. And I feel like self-help space is very much like rooted in telling you there is something wrong with you and you need fixing, rather than actually there's nothing wrong with you, is understanding what you need and finding how you want to show up in the world and own up to it in a way.
Yeah, I think going back to what you both said about there being so much out there now, it does get really overwhelming. So for me, I think obviously I've already spoken about listening to our bodies, but when I get kind of a bit overwhelmed in my mind, I might just go for a walk and just be in nature and just reconnect with myself and ground myself and, just keep it simple. And I almost kind of look at myself like, a toddler might wake up and just be really cranky, and it's like, what's wrong with me? Oh, I just need some food. And sometimes it's just as simple as that, and just sit and be present in the moment and really figure out what it is you need. Journaling really helps a lot for me because obviously I'm a writer. I like to get my thoughts and feelings out there. So yeah, that to add on to what you guys have already said, because I agree with everything.
And I think even in the audience, Andy shared that the question he asked himself in his journal every day is, how will he nourish his body today? And it's going back to that. We think how we nourish our body, ourselves in that day. Because quite often we're like, oh, what am I going to do? What I'm going to output? I'm going to put in this world, not what I'm going to bring to myself. It's true that it's quite a rare prompt. Thanks, Andy, for sharing. And this is really something we it's true that started being in the heart of the conversations in some conversation, and there's a lot of information as well about it. I think giving ourselves like um, this permission to feel it our way, to experience it our way, our body, our rules, is it's a great step. And I think, especially for in a lot of cultures, claiming our bodies is not a given. Actually, it's not even in the US anymore. After the laws changed, like you don't have as much freedom as you used to have as well. And that is important, to be able to claim our bodies as a women, I mean, as women, as men, as whatever we want to be identified as, but also just decide, no matter what the label is on, what am I going to do with it? Like this whole thing I've been gifted every day. Um, and what is the thing that, okay, you mentioned going out in nature, listening to your bodies. Is there certain things, there's movement, is there certain things that you find make a whole difference in the nourishment of your souls, taking care of your bodies? How do you create this liberation of the body?
I think it depends on you as a person. Like there's no one size fits all. I do a lot of Reiki, and that really helps like me kind of moving the energies and releasing a lot of stuff that I've held in over the years. Um, but again, I think it just keep it simple, listen to your body. Like, I get asked this question a lot by my community, and they will say things like, how do I get to the stage that you're at? And I can't tell anyone how to get there, because everyone's journey is different, and what works for me might not work for them. So I think it just goes back to listening to your body and finding, like, really connecting with yourself and finding out what you need.
Yeah, it's true. It does it does happen that, sometimes you don't know where to start. This is where the information overload kicks in, right? Because
Yeah.
you start looking at what others are doing out there, and you see the final result.
Hmm.
So a lot of people here um, talks about like meditation and mindfulness, for example. And or like, for example, I meditate every day, twice a day. Am I fully mindful every single minute of it? Heck no. No. I can absolutely hand up. I can say some days I would only stick to it for 2 minutes and then I'll rush into my day. But sometimes maybe I will be able to. It's rare, but maybe I will take the hour. But what people don't see is that this has only been a new thing over the last couple of years, and that a past version of me was finding it impossible to sit still and experience that. And maybe I didn't have the right guides or the right education. I don't even like to use the word right or wrong there. It wasn't my time. I was even I was looking down on it. I was like, this is a woo woo shit. Like, why am I put in this smelly room? I'm told to close my eyes and smell someone else's armpit, and there's noise outside. Like, hell no, what am I doing here? You know, it's not for me. But the truth is, I didn't realize that at the time. And I write extensively about this, like in my book, because it was important. I didn't realize that I was just setting myself for failure at another thing. You know, I was seeing others being enabled or just doing it, and I didn't understand how they did it. They're saying, how do you do it? Because we don't talk enough about the stuff that we fail at. that, so many hours I sat there thinking about what I was going to cook, thinking about who said something bad to me, letting all the stuff that a guide would tell you don't do. So, this is like why I like to talk about the stuff we don't mention enough, because we say, oh, listen to your body. What do I do when I can't hear what it says to me? You know, what did you do during that time? Because surely you had that moment maybe where you couldn't listen. How was that?
Um, I don't know. I definitely can relate to what you're saying. I remember when I first started meditating, I really find it hard to kind of concentrate, and I would get distracted and be like, what I'm going to make for dinner. Um, I don't really know how I came out of that. I'm going to be honest. I guess as you kind of grow as a person, you kind of just start to. I think at that time of my life, I was writing a lot. So maybe it's about finding another outlet that works for you. So doing something that you enjoy so that you can kind of calm your mind and get to the root of what it is that you need.
I would agree with that. And to me, the word that I like to use is essence, and so sometimes these tools become prescriptive. It's like, okay, so now we're all going to meditate, or we're all going to do breath work, or whatever it is we're going to do. And so we think, let me slot into this thing that I'm supposed to do. But for someone who's really kinesthetic, maybe their meditation needs to be a walking meditation, and they need to be like doing this with their arms or something while they're moving. And that is how I get so excited anytime I'm working with someone or in my life or with myself where I see someone find essential self. They're like, me, cooking, or someone's cooking and they feel like this is my meditation. I'm creating food. Or my husband is a skier, and he goes mountain viewing. He goes into the mountains, and that's his spiritual practice. Just looking at the mountains from very up high. That's not mine, but I want to celebrate that in him, And so if I imagine a world in which each person has the space to explore what their essence is and how they might find that centering, and then to have their community support it, that feels like the way, that feels like the path. But people need that space, and so it's like finding those little pockets of safety in which to explore that. Yeah.
I loved when Molly was saying that. I felt like I was hearing bears chirping.
I could hear them too.
Yeah, okay, cool. It wasn't only me. I think for me, I've been in this space as a practitioner for the past 10 years, and I've done the meditating, the breath work, somatic work, and I feel like what I'm about to share, it might be a little bit even sometimes triggering, but I feel like I've done a lot of those work to become superhuman, like to come above my humanness, and the transformation actually happened for me. And if anybody is in the rock bottom and they're like, I don't even know where to start with, like none of these things work. And also if you, like, for example, after my car accident, when I had concussion and PTSD, even though I was a massive meditator before that, I couldn't meditate anymore. I actually needed those somatic practices to be able to release. So that's why actually meditation doesn't work for some people, especially those with PTSDs and experiences like that. And I feel like that's not talked about often. And that was a very hard pill to swallow for me after many years of meditating, not being able to meditate. I think that's important to say here. And also, it's okay to be human. It's okay sometimes to get on your knees and be like, I don't freaking know anymore. And so many of those moments in my life has been a turning point. And I had a very terrible relationship with religions and with God and all of that for a very long time. And through body work, I connected to something greater than me that I cherish. And one thing that I feel like worked better than anything I've ever done has been, when I don't know, I ask for guidance and I actually listen. And I fully, and there's that relaxation, there's that femininity to be receiving what you're asking for. And I know so many people have traumas around religion, and that actually made us ruthless in a way, like rootless. We don't have any roots, we don't have any ground. And we also feel like we need to, again, I'm going to use this word so many times because it's coming up so much for me, is like performing our way through life rather than being that conduit, being that channel that life lives through you and serves through you. And I think when I have my prayer practices, very simple, like literally you're having a dialogue with your version of the divine. And if you don't have the connection, then I think probably that's not going to be suitable. But even like maybe you could think about it as a dialogue with your higher self, or, you know, we can always establish that connection. But I think for me, that's the simplest. It's so easy. Like sometimes like I take a moment, I'm like, okay, I don't know, just guide me. Or I feel so human right now. I don't know how to lead this session. Just I surrender all of that. I surrender this session to you. And when I actually admit my humility and my humanness, it's just like life is so much easier. And I'm getting emotional as I'm saying this because it really transformed. And none of the years of meditation for the sake of meditating or somatic work to become superhuman didn't work for me until I actually got to this point of like, really, you're human. And you can't expect anything else than that, with your human experiences, with your own suffering, with your own pain. And we need help.
Yeah, it's very profound. And especially, when you say, oh, it's that moment, where you get down on your knees, when life knocks you to a point where you're almost finding beauty in feeling powerless in something. And it's like there's almost like the beauty of letting go in that moment where you're like, you know what? Hey, I don't know. And I don't need to know right now. That it will come. And just embracing that moment of not knowing without getting to this obsession, of the finding the lesson, go upskill, go improve, and just take that break for being like, right now I don't know, and it's okay. It's really, really the surrender. You could feel the surrender, in your expression. Like talking, obviously dirty minds would think of other things, but I really could feel the surrender in there.
And something that is really helpful for me is like alchemy happens in that not knowing, right? Like alchemy happens in that. And I think we're so conditioned to constantly turn our experiences into a positive, like, constantly like gaslighting ourselves into, okay, what is the gift in this? But what if, it's just not part of, like, you haven't gotten to that point yet, just like trust the process and not try to, I always say, like, I've gaslighted myself so many times, like in the past. That was like obviously the punishing self. Like, I've done that so many times to me. And yeah, knowing that alchemy happens in those moments and our lives can change when we actually surrender.
Was
And it's oh, I was going to say it's when you say alchemy, I'm also hearing, and divine, I'm hearing the mystery, right? Like allowing for the mystery that exists. There isn't a spreadsheet that's going to guide us to the thing, or steps 1 through 5. And I really feel what you're saying, Hetty, and feel that myself. It's easier to just ask for help from whatever the bigger thing. And the listening, I call it listening to the whispers. It's like the whispers are there. You just have to listen for them. So I'm delighting in myself hearing you talk, because I just feel so, I feel so resonant with that. Like, yes, that feels like a truth, a deeper truth, right? Yeah.
And I know it might be hard to grasp, and everyone's imagination can lead them to any corner of understanding of what they want to make of it. And I think sometimes it's a lot more practical that we might think is really an idea. Like you mentioned, a lot of things came up of an idea, and it's just giving maybe ourselves that space to have a different idea. You know, that you connect. For some, it will be the spirituality, the divine. For others, it's just to give your mind the space to breathe so you can think of something else. For some others, is to not think, not be in their head. Uh, it can be a whisper. So it's really talking to all the differences that we can have and that the audience can have. Is when something seems too far-fetched out there, it might not be as far-fetched as we think it is. It might just be something very simple for ourselves. Like you said, oh, you wake up cranky, you need to eat. It's simple. Or you wake up cranky and actually you need to sleep a little more. And then you will train better. But it's really, it seems that we're always going back to that space, that carving that moment where we pause and we don't need to have everything figured out. We don't need to be overwhelmed by information. We don't need to have the shoulds that are waiting on our shoulders. Um, and that's something really important. We talk a lot about authenticity out there, or either how to feel authentic, and each of us have their ways. I've asked a question yesterday in Hedi's like meeting. We have a well-being circle once a month, and as part of our community, and we were talking about. I was very curious about like the gut feelings that you get or that we tell you to get, and the question doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone that spoke up had a different definition of their gut feelings, of what it meant, what it usually come up as, how it was conditioned. And I'm sure if I were to ask the same question, because you have lived all different lives and different type of traumas, you're conditioned differently as well. And something that might trigger you might not be triggering to you, and vice versa. But how do you know that something feels good or something doesn't feel good? For people who are not so used to be attuned with themselves, like what's the not the hack, not the tip, just your pure human experience? How does it manifest for you?
It feels easy and flowy and effortless. Normally, that's how I experience when I feel like there's this synergy happening and there's this like ease into that interaction or that opportunity. Or also, like, for example, with the well-being circle, I run them for free, right, for the community. So often in the past, I've done free stuff that felt heavy and felt like I felt like there wasn't this element of like giving, receiving, and I felt like I forced and I dragged my feet to show up. But with this community, like I really feel like I'm held as much as everybody are held in the circle. I think that that effortlessness oftentimes is the sign for me that I need to move with it. But then also I have examples that I moved with that effortlessness and it didn't work out. Right. I think, yeah, I shared in that conversation that I feel like we're putting too much pressure on the intuition so often that we get ourselves actually in the overthinking mind and the feeling body of like, okay, what actually, like, what is clicking? And for me, like, I know I feel it here. Like, I know like there's this, or I feel like these reactions in the body, like a chill, like this feeling of like truth coming over me. It's like, this is amazing. Like I want to do it, even though it's edgy, right? I think for me, it's probably more visceral than anything else. Like that feeling of, yeah, even though I don't know how.
It's so funny that you say that, because I was like, it created so much frictions to try to listen to that famous gut feeling and seeing how things go. And what worked for me was actually to just live things instead to trying to connect to a body that, okay, I was still building that connection with, but actually as you allow yourself to live through things without expectations, things unravel, you know. For example, for an opportunity, yes, you get to know first that partner, and they reveal themselves over time very, very quickly when you give people the chance to do that. If you're dating someone, the same. If it's like with a client, you have your session discovery sessions before like committing to a full 12 months program. So it's really carving that time and space. Like space always helped me align. That's not to say that rush fuck yeah decision didn't lead me to great things as well, but it's another story. How about you, ladies? What was your thing that make
I
you
mean,
go
I,
on?
I'll add that there's some, you both said this, or all three of you have said this. There's some layer of that we all feel probably of how could I be better at gut feelings, and then there it is, right? And there's the systemic piece coming in, like, let me be better at this thing. And so I'm interested in, and you both said this just now, this question of, or not question, but this real experience of, let me just see what happens. Let me just trust that I'll make the right choice sometimes, and sometimes I won't. And then when I don't, I'll be led to a different choice. And then I will refine my own intuition as I move through life. It doesn't make sense to be an 18-year-old who has perfect intuition. It doesn't make sense even to be a 60-year-old who has that. But are we refined? Is the arc that I'm refining it? Great. If I'm moving towards like more refinement as I'm aging, that feels like the right path for me, and then it's this exquisite like learning of my particular animal body. Like, how does my animal body know something is right or wrong? And that's a delightful learning that I'm never going to get to the end of. And it's going to be different for me than it is for you three, different for anyone listening. And for me, it is body led. It is sensation led. It is that sense. For me, I get bubbles, but I didn't know that until I was listening to my body. I wasn't able to track it when I was frozen. And so, but you can't unfreeze yourself in a weekend. That is a process. So it feels more relaxing to me to just lean back and go, I'm going to be curious and just watch, and then be delighted by what I learn, instead of it being like a mission that I have to find my gut instinct protocol or something, Though I've tried that 1,000 times. Like, I'm not fooling anyone. I have done so many protocols and so many things to try to be a better human.
I love this conversation. And when Molly was talking, I had this whole epiphany going on for me. And it was like, actually, intuition can only be present if we trust.
Yeah.
And if trust is not the foundation, then we are constantly like actually like trying to be hyper vigilant. It's like, is this intuition? Is this intuition? Is this intuition? Right? Like, can we relax in, like what Molly said, being curious about, okay, so where am I going, and being open to all possibilities. And again, going back to the non-duality conversation, it's like there's no extreme right or wrong going on. Only by practicing it you can explore what is true for you.
How did you find that balance between curiosity and
I think I think for me, because I'm quite a spiritual person, so my intuition has always been quite spot on for me. But one thing I found that I have to ask myself when it does come up is this being trigger led? Like, is this gut feeling a trigger? And that's kind of helps me kind of identify the just follow follow your heart or your gut or whatever. Or, okay, cool, let me take a step back because my gut is telling me to be cautious here because there's a trigger.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what does it take? We talk a lot about triggers. What does it take for you to recognize a trigger and be like, okay,
I think again, it's that listening to your body, and I might be in a situation and I'll feel my whole self go hot, or I'll shut down and I'll ask myself, okay, why is this happening? Because this isn't a usual reaction for me, and I will know that something is triggering me, and it's about kind of breaking that trigger down almost like it's an onion, and pulling apart that onion piece layer by layer until you get to the root cause of that trigger. But for me, being very vocal when I'm in those kind of moments with the people around me, I'll be like, hey, okay, this has triggered me. You haven't done anything wrong, but I've identified it's a trigger. I need to voice that to you so that if I start to freak out, you know why.
gosh, wow, like you really pinned on something super important there. Because, like, as in the self discovering journey, starting to figure out what triggers you and what doesn't is so important, but communicating it to others,
Yeah,
Mm.
gosh, that is so powerful, but so hard as well. We were
yeah.
talking about
It
the
took
hard
me
things.
a long time to get there.
Yeah. And it's practice as well. I think sometimes we do it and we find the words that match that moment, and sometimes it's harder than others, maybe depending on the trigger or
Yeah.
how far we've gone. It's a hard practice.
Yeah, it's hard practice. I think the thing that made it easy for me is that I started to feel safe in the environments I was in. And I realized for me, safety was a big factor in kind of peeling back those triggers.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's almost like, for example, if we carry guilt or not being able to, or shame for being triggered, or like guilt for not being able to communicate
Yeah,
well when triggered, it's important to go back to this notion of safety, because you can't communicate if you're not feeling safe.
yeah,
So then maybe instead of thinking, oh, how can I share about this trigger, it's like, oh, how can I make myself feel safe first?
yeah, yeah. And
Claim
then
that
you'll just,
safety.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm.
Gosh, ladies, this has been an incredible conversation. I told you time will fly. And we're looking at it and we're almost like half past 1 hour still talking. I give you this opportunity to share some final words. Doesn't need to be a wisdom, can be a question to the audience out there, could be anything you like, but just some final words to the audience listening in, present today, or listening in like in a few days or in the future. What would you like to leave them with?
I think for me, I would say if you're not sure where that resilience is right now or how to find it, don't worry, it will come. Um, don't kind of put a timeline on when it's going to come. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I need it now, now, now. Why am I not there? Just go with the flow and it will come.
I think I would say to anyone listening, you are alive in 2025 in this most wild time. Maybe everyone has said that, in past times, but this time feels unprecedented. Um, and so the question I would ask that I ask myself and would ask out to everyone is, um, you know, how do you want to be present for this time and for the people around you and for yourself. And if you don't have people around you, consider finding people to be around. It seems like a time of building community, and we're social animals. And so, how do you want to be a social animal? Yeah.
I think I'm gonna share the question that I already mentioned. What do you need to enjoy yourself more right now in this moment for the rest of this week? And I feel like with the state of the world, with everything that is going on, as much as there's so much guilt and shame in enjoying our life or taking pleasure in the little things that we have because we feel guilty for all the sufferings that the rest of the world is going through. But that's what anchors you. But that's what strengthens you to be able to be an ally, to be a support for all those that actually need you. And yeah, so what do you need to enjoy yourself more?
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for your input, your questions, your vulnerability, and being able to say, some days I didn't know, some days I still don't know. Hear what worked, hear what didn't. It's not easy. It's not easy also to respond to a stranger calling you and telling you, hey, I've got this crazy idea, and come join me and share your story out there. But I'm very grateful for you, and I'm sure the audience is. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Grit Makers podcast. Amazing sunshine, souls like sun shining their resilience true and true. I'm very excited, and I wish you a lovely evening or morning if it's the morning for you.